related to banking, and other ministries also discussed. So the Power Minister was here in the morning to discuss with the heads of the banks the progress of the Uday scheme. The Chief Economic Advisor had a presentation and some suggestions with regard to the interoperability of the financial inclusion schemes, so as any possible roadblocks in that could be smoothened out further. Secretary Agriculture was here and he made a detailed presentation on the Krishi Bima Yojana. Besides this, the progress of schemes under the financial inclusion, Stand Up India, Mudra, all these subjects were discussed. But one of the key subjects, obviously, facing the banking situations is the credit flow and the expansion of the banking activity, and the positions with regard to the NPAs was also discussed. As a government, we expected the heads of the banking institutions to be frank and upfront with regard to the situation, and that is why the RBI has, after the quality review of the assets, decided upon the provisioning. The overall operational profit of the public sector banks last year was quite significant. It was in excess of 1,40,000 crores. So the operational profits of the public sector banks is significant. It is on account of the provisioning that the overall the PSBs declared a net loss of about 18,000 crores. And obviously, a significant amount of provisioning having been made in the last 2 quarters, what is the road ahead? And the bank CEOs and the government had a candid discussion on this subject, and various suggestions have come up with regard to empowering the banks itself to function in an environment where, on commercially prudent considerations, they can deal with the situation. The government is fully committed to supporting the banks in this regard. The Bankruptcy and the Insolvency Code has already been enacted. It will become operational very soon. Another set of amendments to the debt recovery legislation and the securitization legislation are before Parliament. The Joint Committee is considering them. If the report comes before the next session, we hope to further empower the banks legally. So these set of 3 laws, coupled with the SDR mechanism, has completely empowered the banks. Various suggestions did come up, and the IBA itself would be examining some of them. The government would be also open for discussions on this regard as to the suggestions that the banks further put forward. with regard to resolving the stress that has been created. One of the key considerations was that in situations like this, banks should be empowered and consequently should be protected so as they can bring about commercially prudent settlements. I'm sure when the IBA meets later in the day, they will come out with some specific suggestions in this regard. The government also firmly believes that the NPA situation having risen on account of certain sectoral stress, a time has to now come with the kind of operational profits the banks are showing, that we must support them fully so that their ability to support growth remains sound. And therefore, any kind of empowerment and protection which we have candidly discussed today, if it comes up in the course of subsequent suggestions by the IBA, the government would be open to considering some of them.
Now you can ask questions. One by one. Yes.
Sir, Shubham from Cogensis. So were there any discussions today with regard to how much funds would the government additionally infuse on account of bank recapitalization?
See, there was no discussion today. We have already committed an amount of 25,000 crores this year,
Yes,
and
sir.
I've also said if more funds are required,
Right.
we'll try and make them available. We stand by that commitment.
Okay.
Yes.
So what's the sense you got from the banks? What's the narrative at their end? You have pointed out on the fact that the operational profits of banks is not too bad. So, going forward, this could be possibly the last of the AQR impact that we are witnessing. Any sectors they've spoken about where some kind of pickup signs are there, any kind of a revival
See,
activity?
the banks did feel that many companies in the steel sector, some in the infrastructure sector, are moving. The Uday bond scheme has been reasonably successful, but then there are still in a number of these areas some distance that has to be covered.
Yes.
What will be the contours of the stressed asset fund that the government is mulling? Will banks pick up stakes in these funds?
Well,
And-
I'll tell you, I won't want to be specific at this stage, but then in a meeting of this kind where discussions take place, and I've indicated the discussions are with regard to A, empowerment of the banks, B, protection for bona fide decisions, and C, creating solutions. So what you have asked really falls in the third category. So these are the three kinds of suggestions which have come up. I am not specifying each of those suggestions specifically, but I have given you a sufficient indication of what they said.
Sir, any timeline that the government is giving with respect to resolution of these NPAs, and especially on the suggestions that the IBA has made so that the government is able to protect the commercially
No, there is
viable
no
interest?
timeline. There are no timelines in this.
Yes,
What
Vishal.
has been the experience with the loan and the standard loan?
Well, I'll tell you, the last year's experience was better than what we expected. 1,22,000 crores was the target fixed. We exceeded the target by 12 to 13,000 crores. And this year, the target is 50% higher than last year. So we expect those targets to be met. And we have also emphasized to the banks that even though NPAs is a very important issue, their focus from NPA must remain. Their focus must remain, but at the same time, the important financial inclusion schemes, which are a way of flowing credit itself, must continue.
Yes.
हमारा सवाल आपसे है कि ये जो स्टार्टअप योजना भारत सरकार ने चलाई है, इसमें अब तक गांव के लोगों तक स्टार्टअप योजना में आपने कितना लोन दिया?
देखिए, अभी तो शुरू हुई है, तो अभी उसके इस पूरा साल में अगर चलेगी, क्योंकि इस वर्ष में महिला, SC ST इनके जो कैटेगरीज हैं, हर ब्रांच को 2-2 देने हैं, वो प्रक्रिया अभी आरंभ हुई है, तो थोड़ी चल ले तो उसके बाद उसके आंकड़े इकट्ठे करने की प्रक्रिया चलेगी.
So you're supporting banks in every possible way. You even said that you will be hand-holding them whenever there would be a requirement. You're even ready to consider probably giving them more capital. But what is the commitment that the banks have given back to you now that you are working to provide?
Well, this whole, I don't think it's a quid pro quo between the government and the banks. It's a, we have supported, the PSBs have played a very important role, and therefore we are supporting them so that they can in turn support lending and support credit and support growth.
Yes, Srinivas.
Sir, this protection mechanism for the senior management, should it be coming from the bank board bureau, or will it be finally approved by the finance ministry?
Well, let's wait for the suggestion from the IBA to come up.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.